The first time I saw the black Mercedes cutting through my hayfield, I honestly thought somebody was lost. Out where I live, in Oak Haven County, Texas, people get turned around all the time. GPS will send a delivery driver through a cow pond if the signal gets bored enough. So when that car rolled past my south fence just after sunrise, throwing dust over the grass my father planted before I was old enough to hold a rake, I stood on the porch with my coffee and tried to be reasonable. I told myself, maybe it was a mistake. Maybe some poor city person followed the wrong little blue line on a phone. Maybe they would realize pretty quickly that a hayfield is not a road. Then the same Mercedes came back the next morning, same time, same angle, same slow, clean, confident line across my property, like the driver had paid taxes on every blade of grass under those tires. By the third morning, there were 2 cars behind it. By the fifth, there were 4. That was when I stopped, calling it a mistake. My name is Jackson Brody. I am 42 years old, divorced, and I run a small hay and pecan farm that has been in my family since my grandfather bought it with money he saved driving trucks at night. It is not fancy land. 'Tis not the kind people put on postcards. But it is ours, and if you have ever inherited land with sweat already soaked into it, you know that ours is not a small word. The trouble came from Crestwood Manors, a gated community built on the ridge west of my farm. Big houses, stone mailboxes, lawns greener than anything God intended in August. Their main road curved around the hill and added about 6 minutes to the drive into town. My field, if you ignored fences, ownership, common decency, and basic reality, made a perfect shortcut. The woman leading the parade was Cynthia Vance, president of the Crestwood Property Board. I knew her from county meetings. She always sat in the front row, wearing pearls and that patient little smile people use when they are waiting for everyone else to catch up to how smart they are. On the 6th morning, I put up my first sign, private property. No through traffic. Cynthia slowed down just enough to read it. Then she looked toward my porch, lifted 2 fingers off the steering wheel, and waved. Not friendly, not embarrassed. It was the kind of wave you give a valet. Something in me went quiet right then. I grew up being told to keep my head down, especially around people with money. My dad used to say, "Jackson, a rich fool is still rich, and that means he can afford to be louder than you." For years, I believed that. I let people talk over me. I let banks call me buddy while denying extensions. I let contractors look around my place and assume I was some simple countryman who did not understand paperwork. Cynthia made the same mistake. She saw a beat-up porch, work boots, rusted equipment, and she decided I was just standing in the way of her convenience. That afternoon, I installed 2 trail cameras, one on the barn, one on the fence line. The next morning, I watched the footage on my laptop as Cynthia's Mercedes rolled into frame with 3 cars behind her. She pointed at the sign and laughed. The driver behind her honked like they were all in on the joke. I saved the clip. Then I saved the next one, and the next one. By the end of the week, I had plates, faces, timestamps, tire marks, photos of torn grass, and one very clear video of Cynthia stopping beside my new sign, lowering her window, and saying loud enough for the camera to catch. You should really mark this better if you don't want people confused. Confused? That word sat in my stomach like bad meat. Because nobody was confused. They were comfortable. I went to the sheriff first. Deputy Carl Jenkins came out, looked at the ruts, watched the videos, and sighed the way tired lawmen sigh when rich neighborhoods start acting like sovereign nations. You can file trespass complaints, he said, and I'll document everything. But if they claim they thought it was an old access path, it may turn into civil court. It is not an old access path, I said. I believe you, Carl replied. But believing you and making them stop are 2 different things. So I started building a record that did not need belief. A cream-colored envelope appeared in my mailbox. addressed to Mr. Brody in embossed lettering, because apparently even threats need nice stationery. The letter said Crestwood residents had used the farm passage for community access, and that my attempts to block it created a safety concern. They asked me to cooperate in the spirit of neighborly accommodation. Neighborly accommodation. That was their phrase for driving over my livelihood before breakfast. The next morning, I stood by the fence when Cynthia came through. This time she stopped. Her window slid down. Perfume drifted out before her voice did. "Mr. Brody," she said, "this is getting silly." "I agree." She smiled like she had one already. "Good. Then remove the signs." No, her smile thinned. "People have been using this route for weeks, because you told them to." I told them there appeared to be a long-standing passage. It appeared that way because you kept driving over it. Her eyes hardened. "You know, cooperation would make this easier." "For who?" She looked past me at my barn, my old tractor, the patched roof on the equipment shed, for everyone, including you. Legal disputes can get expensive. There it was. The real language. Not neighborly, not confused. Expensive. I leaned one hand on the fence post and said, "Cynthia, I have repaired machinery with parts older than your subdivision. I have kept this farm alive through drought, debt, divorce, and hail the size of golf balls. You are not the first expensive thing that tried to scare me." For the first time, she did not have a quick answer. Then she said, "You will regret being difficult." And she drove on. That afternoon, I installed a locked pipe gate across the rutted path. I posted 2 more reflective signs. I photographed everything. The next morning, the gate was in the ditch. The lock had been cut. Tire tracks swerved around the posts, deep and angry. I stood there in the gray light, looking at that broken gate, and the old version of me wanted to explode. Wanted to call, wanted to yell. Wanted to drive up to Crestwood and make a scene. Instead, I took pictures. Every angle, every track, every scrape on the metal. Then I called Deputy Carl again. He looked at the damage and said, "That is not confusion anymore." "No," I said, "that is intent." The day after that, something worse happened. One of my yearling calves got spooked by a speeding SUV and tore through a stretch of wire near the creek bed. It was not dead, thank God, but it was cut up and limping, and when I knelt beside it with mud on my jeans and blood on my gloves, I felt the last polite piece of me disappear. Not because of the money, not even because of the damage. Because Cynthia had decided her 6 minutes mattered more than a living thing. That evening, my niece Sarah came over. She works in the county clerk's office, and she has the calm voice of someone who reads ugly documents all day and still believes paper can save you. She flipped through my folder at the kitchen table. Videos, reports, survey notes. Photos, the HOA letter, the cut lock, the calf. Then she looked up and said, "Uncle Jackson, they are trying to create a pattern." I know. No. I mean legally. If they use it long enough, they may try to argue some kind of prescriptive access. I laughed once, but it had no humor in it. They trespass, then use the trespass to claim rights. That is how people like this think. I looked out the window toward the field, where the tire scar cut through the grass like a wound. Sarah slid the folder back to me and said, "Do not fight loud. Fight clean." So I did. I got Amanda's full survey packet. I got the report on the calf. I got Carl's incident numbers. I filed notice with the county. I sent certified letters to Crestwood's board, their attorney, and Cynthia herself, clearly stating there was no access right, no permission, and any further entry would be documented as intentional trespass. Then I installed the posts. Not a fence. Not a trap. Not anything hidden. 6 bright yellow steel bollards, set in concrete, permitted, surveyed, and placed entirely within my property, right where the fake road entered my field. You could see them from 100 yards away. You could see the signs from farther. They looked almost ridiculous, standing there at dawn, like 6 stubborn candles in the dirt. Sarah came by before work, stared at them, and said, "That should end it." I shook my head. "No, that will invite the ending." Cynthia arrived. At 7:16 on Friday morning, I was in the barn office watching the camera feed. The Mercedes crested the ridge first, followed by a white SUV and a gray pickup. They slowed when they saw the Bollards. For almost 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then Cynthia got out. She was wearing a cream coat and sunglasses, dressed like she was arriving at brunch instead of a crime scene. She walked straight to the closest post and slapped it with her palm. The sound carried through the camera microphone, sharp and hollow. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Take these down before someone gets hurt. I stepped outside and used the speaker mounted under the barn camera. "Cynthia," I said, my voice echoing over the field. "You are on private property. Turn around." She spun toward the camera, face twisted with fury. "You cannot block a community access route. There is no community access route. You are endangering residents. You are trespassing." The driver in the white SUV leaned out and called, "Cynthia, maybe we should just go around." She turned on him like he had betrayed a nation. "Stay where you are." Then she got back in her Mercedes. I remember the sound first, the engine revving too hard, tires biting loose dirt. That awful half-second where you know a person is about to do the stupidest thing possible and there is nothing left to say. She drove forward. The Mercedes hit the center bollard with a sound like a dumpster drop from the sky. The hood folded. The bumper cracked. Steam burst out in a white cloud. The car stopped dead, but the bollard did not move an inch. For a moment, the whole field went silent. Then Cynthia stumbled out, one shoe missing, sunglasses crooked, screaming. "He set a trap. He set a trap." Deputy Carl arrived in less than 5 minutes. I had already sent him the live clip. He stepped out, looked at the wreck, the signs, the yellow posts, the cameras. Then at Cynthia. "Ma'am," he said, "did you drive into that?" "Stationary post." He put it there, on his land. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Carl turned to me. I handed him the folder. Permits, survey, certified notices, photos from installation, timestamps, everything. He flipped through it slowly, then said, "Mr. Brody appears to have done everything properly." Cynthia's face changed then. Not fear exactly. Recognition. The terrible moment when a bully realizes the quiet person kept receipts. Crestwood sued me 2 weeks later. They claimed unlawful obstruction, emotional distress, and interference with community movement. Their attorney tried to make me look unstable, bitter, unreasonable. He used words like hostile and retaliatory. My attorney used simpler words. Private land, no easement. Repeated warnings. Intentional trespass, property damage, livestock injury, video evidence. In court, they played Cynthia's footage first, trying to make the crash look dramatic. That was their mistake. Everyone saw the signs, everyone saw the posts. Everyone saw her stop, argue, get back in, and accelerate. The judge watched it twice. Then he looked over his glasses and asked, "Mrs. Vance, were you aware this was not your property?" She hesitated. I believed residents had a right to pass. That was not my question. The room got very still. "Yes," she said. "And did you have written permission?" "No." "And did you receive notice?" Her attorney stood. "Your Honor, please, sit down," the judge said. Cynthia whispered, "Yes." The lawsuit was dismissed. Crestwood was ordered to stop all access attempts immediately. They had to pay for the damaged gate, the veterinary bill, the survey costs, and part of my legal fees. Cynthia resigned before sunset. That night, I stood by those yellow bollards with a cup of coffee, watching the fields settle into evening. The tire ruts were still there, but grass was already creeping back into them. That is the thing about land. If people stop hurting it long enough, it tries to heal. A month later, a man from Crestwood came by, not to argue, to apologize. He stood at my gate, holding his hat in both hands, and said, "She told us you had agreed to it." I believed him. Not because it changed anything, but because most people do not join a lie at full speed. They get eased into it. One shortcut, one excuse. One person with a title saying it is fine. Before long, they are driving across a man's field and calling him unreasonable for standing in front of them. I still have the bollards. I could remove them now, but I do not. They remind me of something I wish I had learned younger. Boundaries do not make you mean. They make the truth visible. So you tell me, was I wrong to let Cynthia destroy her own car against a line she had been warned not to cross? Or was that the only language she was ever going to understand? Have you ever seen someone with a little power, an HOA president, a landlord, a boss, a neighbor, use rules and money to bully somebody they thought would stay quiet? Drop your story in the comments, because somewhere out there, somebody is being told to move aside on land that belongs to them. And maybe they need to hear that standing still is not the same thing as starting a fight. So subscribe to HO Drama Neighbor for more.